My name is Sarah Flame. I'm 26 years old, and I just watched my entire life go up in smoke when my house burned down 3 hours ago. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. The acrid smell of charred wood and melted plastic still clings to my clothes as I sit in my car outside what used to be my home. The fire department has finally left, their red trucks disappearing into the October night, leaving behind nothing but devastation and the bitter taste of ash in my mouth. My hands shake as I pull out my phone. The screen cracked from when I dropped it, rushing out of the burning house with nothing but the clothes on my back. A pair of running shorts, a university sweatshirt, and sneakers that are now ruined from running through puddles of fire-suppressant foam. I've been a fire investigator for 6 years, ever since I graduated from the fire science program at Sacramento State with highest honors. I've seen hundreds of burned buildings, interviewed thousands of victims, and processed more evidence than I can count. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepares you for watching your own life literally go up in flames. The irony isn't lost on me. Sarah Flame, fire investigator, loses her home to fire. The jokes will write themselves if this ever gets out at the department. But this wasn't some cosmic irony or cruel twist of fate. This was deliberate, calculated, and personal. I scroll to our family group chat, the Brennan family, a name my mom chose when she set it up 3 years ago, back when we pretended to be the perfect family. My fingers hover over the keyboard. The last message in the chat was from 2 weeks ago. My sister Emma sharing ultrasound photos of her first pregnancy. 17 heart eye emojis from my mother followed immediately. I had just sent a single congratulations message. That's how it always goes in our family. Emma shares news, gets showered with attention. I share news about solving major cases or getting commendations, and I'm lucky to get a nice job from my dad. But right now, I'm desperate enough to swallow my pride. My house burned down. Can I stay tonight? I type, my thumb trembling as I hit send. I wait. The little indicators show that both my parents and Emma have read the message immediately. I can see the 3 dots appear and disappear multiple times under my father's name, like he's typing and deleting responses. Finally, after what feels like an eternity but is probably only 3 minutes, my father responds, "No room for you. Sleep on the street." I stare at the message, reading it over and over, hoping I misunderstood. But there's no ambiguity. Robert Brennan, CEO of Brennan Construction, worth an estimated $47 million, according to the last Forbes local business profile, owner of a mansion with 12 bedrooms and 7 bathrooms, is telling his daughter to sleep on the street because her house just burned down. My heart sinks, but I'm not entirely surprised. My father has made it clear for years that I'm a disappointment. When I chose to become a fire investigator, instead of joining the family business after college, he stopped contributing to my student loan payments. When I refused to marry Bradley Peterson, his business partner's son who had wandering hands and the personality of wet cardboard, he canceled the trust fund that was supposed to help me buy a house. And when I started asking uncomfortable questions about some of Brennan Construction's building practices during family dinners, particularly their unusually frequent projects involving post-disaster rebuilds, he made it clear I was no longer welcome at those dinners. But my mom's response cuts even deeper. Your sister's sleep is more important than your problems. The favoritism has always been obvious, but seeing it spelled out so starkly in a moment of genuine crisis feels like a physical blow. My sister Emma, 24, beautiful, compliant Emma, who married into old money and lives in a mansion with 7 bedrooms, has always been their golden child. She followed the script perfectly. Homecoming queen in high school, sorority president at USC, married at 22, to Jonathan Whitmore III, heir to a hedge fund fortune, already pregnant with their first grandchild at 24. Everything I'm not. Emma followed up with her own message. Sorry, Sarah, but we're renovating the guest wing. The contractor said the dust might be harmful for the baby. Maybe try a hotel? A hotel. With what money? The fire took everything, including my laptop with my current case files, my credentials, my backup hard drives, and my emergency cash I kept in a supposedly fireproof safe. A bitter irony that the safe wasn't fireproof enough for a deliberately set blaze using professional-grade accelerants. My credit cards were in my purse, which is now a melted pile of synthetic leather somewhere in the wreckage of what used to be my kitchen. My debit card was in my running shorts pocket, but my checking account has about $300 in it. I live paycheck to paycheck despite having a respectable job because I refuse to take money from my family, unlike Emma, who gets a clothing allowance of $5,000 a month despite being married to a millionaire. I lean back in my driver's seat and close my eyes, trying to process the magnitude of what's happening. Not just the fire. I can deal with the fire. Insurance will eventually cover the house, and I can rebuild. What's harder to process is the stark confirmation of what I've always suspected but never wanted to admit. My family doesn't actually love me. They love the idea of me, or rather, they love the idea of what they wish I was. But the real me, the me that chose a career in law enforcement over luxury, the me that asks hard questions instead of keeping quiet, the me that values justice over family harmony, that me is disposable. Most people don't know what I really do for a living. My family certainly doesn't understand it. They think I'm just some low-level city employee who fills out paperwork about kitchen fires and electrical problems. They have no idea that I'm actually one of the top arson investigators in the state, that I've solved cases that have sent powerful people to prison, that I've uncovered conspiracy networks that run deeper than anyone imagines. I have a 98% conviction rate on cases that go to trial. I've testified as an expert witness in federal court 17 times. I've received commendations from the State Fire Marshal, the FBI, and the National Association of Fire Investigators. Last year, I gave the keynote speech at the Pacific Coast Association of Fire Chiefs annual conference. The year before that, I was featured in Fire Investigator magazine for my work developing new techniques for identifying accelerant patterns in high-heat fires. And they definitely don't know that the fire that just destroyed my house wasn't an accident. I've been investigating a series of suspicious fires across the city for the past 8 months. 9 buildings, all owned by different people, all insured for significantly more than their current market value, all destroyed in fires that the initial reports classified as electrical failures or gas leaks. But I've found patterns that the other investigators missed. The burn patterns, the accelerant residues, the timing, the financial connections. It all points to a professional arson ring with serious resources and inside knowledge. Tonight's fire had all the same markers, plus some new ones that made it personal. The smell was wrong from the beginning. When I came home from my evening 5-mile run around Riverside Park, I could detect the faint odor of accelerant before I even saw the flames. It wasn't just any accelerant. It was a specific blend of chemicals that I've only encountered in 3 other cases, all involving buildings that burned completely to the ground within 45 minutes of ignition. The fire started in my basement, specifically in the corner where I keep my filing cabinets containing all my research on the arson ring. Not in the electrical panel, not near the water heater, not in any of the places where accidental fires typically start. It started exactly where my most sensitive case files were stored. The fire moved too fast and burned too hot for a normal structure fire. The temperature had to have exceeded 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit based on the metal distortion patterns I observed. That's only possible with professional accelerants and possibly additional oxidizers to feed the flames. And most telling of all, someone had disabled my smoke detectors by removing the batteries. All of them, throughout the house. I only discovered this when I was evacuating, and realized none of them had gone off despite the house being full of smoke. Someone tried to destroy my investigation by destroying my home and killing me in the process. I pull out my backup phone, an old model I keep in my glove compartment for emergencies like this, and dial my partner, Marcus Williams. He picks up on the second ring. Sarah? Jesus Christ, I heard about the fire on the scanner. Are you hurt? Please tell me you're okay. Marcus has been my partner for 3 years, but we've been friends for 5. He's the one who recommended me for this position when I graduated from the fire academy. He's seen me work crime scenes, knows my capabilities, respects my instincts. When other investigators dismiss my theories as too complicated or far-fetched, Marcus listens and asks good questions. I'm fine. But Marcus, this wasn't an accident. Someone torched my place. There's a long pause, and I can hear him moving around, probably getting dressed to come help me. You sure? I mean, I know you're thorough, but you just lived through a trauma. Sometimes, Marcus, I found accelerant residue before the fire trucks even left. Someone disabled all my smoke detectors, and the fire started in the exact corner of my basement where I keep all my files on the Mitchell investigation. The Mitchell investigation is what I've been calling the arson ring case, named after the first victim I suspected was targeted, Dr. Patricia Mitchell, an 87-year-old retired teacher whose rent-controlled apartment building burned down 4 months ago. The building was in the prime Marina district, worth millions for redevelopment. Dr. Mitchell's death was ruled accidental by the initial investigator, but I found accelerant traces that everyone else missed, plus a financial connection that led me down a rabbit hole of shell companies and suspicious real estate deals. Shit. Okay, where are you now? Sitting outside the wreckage like an idiot, texting my family for help. What did they say? I read him the messages verbatim. Marcus knows my family situation. He's been to exactly one Brennan family barbecue, where my father spent the entire time talking about Emma's wedding plans, while completely ignoring the fact that I had just solved a major case involving a meth lab explosion that could have killed dozens of people. What? Sarah, that's fucked up. Get over here right now. Beth is already making up the guest room, and she's got a pot of coffee on. This is why I love working with Marcus. 15 years on the force. 10 as a fire investigator. Decorated veteran who's seen everything twice. But he still believes in right and wrong. Still treats people with decency and respect. His wife Beth is a nurse at UCSF Medical Center, and she's never once made me feel like a third wheel when I show up at their house for dinner or game nights. Thanks. But I need to process the scene first while it's still hot. Can you meet me here? And bring the portable gas chromatograph if you can. I want to get accelerant samples analyzed before anyone decides this was accidental. I'm already in my car. 20 minutes. As I wait for Marcus, I walk around the perimeter of my destroyed home, taking photos with my backup phone and making mental notes that I'll transcribe later. The fire department did their job well. They contained the blaze before it could spread to neighboring houses, but they also inadvertently destroyed evidence with their hoses and axes. That's always the tension in fire investigation. The firefighters have to save lives and property, even if it means compromising the crime scene. I can still read the burn patterns on the remaining walls, even in the dark with just my phone's flashlight. The fire started low and burned upward in a V pattern that's consistent with liquid accelerant being poured at the base of the walls. The intensity of the heat warped the metal filing cabinets, but it didn't completely destroy them. The files are gone, but the hard drives from my computers might be salvageable if I can get them to a data recovery specialist. More importantly, I can see evidence that confirms this was a professional job. The accelerant was applied in specific patterns designed to ensure total destruction of the basement area, while making the fire look like it could have started from an electrical failure. If I hadn't been trained to recognize these patterns, if I hadn't spent 6 years learning to read the story that fires tell, this would have looked like an accident to most investigators. But I can read the story, and the story is that someone wanted me dead, and my investigation buried. My neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, approaches cautiously from her front porch. She's 78, retired from teaching elementary school for 40 years, and has lived next door since before I was born. She knew me when I was a kid, riding my bike up and down this street, and she's been like a grandmother to me since I moved back to the neighborhood 3 years ago. Oh, dear God, Sarah, I'm so sorry about your house. Such a terrible thing to happen. Do you have somewhere to stay tonight? I'm working on it, Mrs. Henderson. But I need to ask you something important. Did you see anything unusual tonight? Any strangers around the house? Any vehicles that didn't belong? She wraps her robe tighter around her shoulders and thinks for a moment. Mrs. Henderson is one of those neighbors who knows everything that happens on the block. She's retired, so she's home most of the time, and she's naturally observant. Well, now that you mention it, there was a van parked across the street around 6 o'clock. I noticed it because it was blocking Mrs. Garcia's driveway, and I was thinking I should go tell them to move before she got home from work. My pulse quickens. What kind of van? Did you see any company markings? It was white, one of those big cargo vans. Had some kind of logo on the side, looked official. I thought it was the gas company or maybe the cable company, but it seemed odd because there wasn't any scheduled work in the neighborhood. The HOA usually sends notices about that kind of thing. This fits the pattern perfectly. 4 of the other arson sites had witnesses who reported seeing white utility vans in the area shortly before the fires. The arsonists are using fake utility vehicles to case their targets and blend in while they prepare the sites. Did you see the people who got out of the van? 2 men, both wearing those blue coverall uniforms. They had clipboards and tool bags, looked like legitimate repair workers. But they were only here for about 20 minutes, and I never saw them actually go into any of the houses or work on any utility lines. What time did they leave? Must have been around 6:30. I remember because I was watching the evening news, and the weather report was just starting. The van left, and maybe 15 minutes later I smelled smoke. 15 minutes. Just enough time for the arsonist to set up delayed ignition devices and get clear of the area. This is definitely the same crew that's been operating across the city. Mrs. Henderson, this is really important. Do you think you'd be able to identify the men if you saw them again? Oh, I don't know about that, dear. They were pretty far away, and I wasn't really paying close attention, but I might recognize the van if I saw it again. It had a dent in the rear bumper. Looked like someone had backed into something. Marcus arrives as I'm taking photos of tire marks on the street where the van was parked. He's driving his personal truck instead of the department vehicle, which means he's here as my friend first and my partner second. He's wearing jeans and a fire department sweatshirt, and he's carrying a duffel bag that I know contains evidence collection supplies. "Talk to me," he says, pulling on latex gloves and booties. I fill him in on everything. The accelerant smell, the disabled smoke detectors, the burn patterns, Mrs. Henderson's witness account, and most importantly, the targeting of my case files. You think they know you're onto them? I think they know exactly who I am and what I've found. This wasn't random, Marcus. This was surgical. They knew I keep my case files in the basement. They knew I go running at the same time every evening. They knew exactly how to make this look like an accident while destroying the specific evidence that threatens them. So what's our next move? We process this scene like the crime scene it is. We collect evidence, we analyze it, and then we figure out who's been watching me closely enough to plan this attack. We spend the next 3 hours carefully examining every inch of my destroyed home. Marcus photographs everything while I collect samples of the accelerant residue using techniques I've perfected over 6 years in this job. Despite the water damage from the fire hoses, we're able to gather enough evidence to confirm my suspicions. The accelerant is a custom blend that includes not just gasoline or kerosene, but also additional chemicals designed to increase burn temperature and speed. It's the same exact composition as the accelerant used in the Morrison Street fire last month and the Patterson warehouse fire 6 weeks ago. Same fingerprint, I tell Marcus as we pack up our evidence bags. And the burn pattern is identical to the Patterson warehouse. We're looking at the same arsonist, or more likely, the same team of arsonists working from the same playbook. So we're definitely dealing with professionals. This isn't some guy getting revenge against his ex-wife or trying to commit insurance fraud on his failing restaurant. No, this is way bigger than that. Someone is coordinating these fires, someone with resources, connections, and access to specialized equipment and chemicals. And now they're willing to commit murder to protect their operation. My phone buzzes with another text from my mother. I hope you find somewhere to stay tonight. We'll pray for you. Prayers. As if prayers will rebuild my house or catch the criminals who burned it down. As if prayers are some kind of substitute for actually helping your daughter when she's in crisis. You're staying with us tonight, Marcus says, noticing my expression. And tomorrow we're going to start hunting these bastards systematically. They made a mistake targeting me, I say, looking back at the smoking ruins of my house. They think they can intimidate me into dropping the investigation. But all they've done is give me physical evidence linking them to at least 3 other fires, plus attempted murder charges when we catch them, plus pissing off the one person in this city who's best equipped to track them down. The drive to Marcus and Beth's house in suburban Oakland takes 30 minutes in late-night traffic. They live in a modest 3-bedroom ranch house in a quiet neighborhood with good schools and tree-lined streets. It's the kind of place where kids ride bikes and neighbors know each other's names. Everything my family's mansion in Pacific Heights isn't. Beth Williams is waiting up for us with hot coffee, clean clothes that might fit me, and the kind of unconditional support that I've never gotten from my own family. She's a pediatric ICU nurse, so she's seen plenty of trauma and knows how to help people through crisis without making it about herself. The guest room is ready. There are fresh towels in the bathroom, and I put together some toiletries and basic clothes that should work until you can go shopping, she says, wrapping me in a hug that smells like lavender and safety. Do you need anything else tonight? Food? Something to help you sleep? Just some time to decompress and figure out what comes next. Take all the time you need. You're welcome to stay here as long as necessary. This is what family should be. People who help without keeping score, who offer support without conditions or ulterior motives. People who treat you like you matter. The guest room is small but comfortable, decorated with Beth's photography, and furnished with pieces that actually invite you to relax. For the first time in hours, I feel safe, but I don't sleep. Instead, I spend the night reconstructing my investigation from memory, writing down every detail I can remember about the 9 fires, the patterns I've identified, the suspects I've been tracking, and the evidence that was destroyed tonight. The most frustrating loss is my timeline chart, a massive wall-mounted display that tracked every fire chronologically, with notes about weather conditions, insurance payouts, property sales, and connections between victims. It took me 3 months to build that timeline, and now it exists only in my memory. But as I recreate it on paper, new patterns emerge. The fires aren't just targeting random properties in gentrifying neighborhoods. They're specifically targeting properties that stand in the way of major development projects. Dr. Mitchell's apartment building was blocking a luxury hotel project. The Morrison Street warehouse was preventing a shopping complex expansion. The Patterson warehouse was the last holdout against a mixed-use development that would include high-end condos and retail space. By morning, I have a working theory. Someone is using arson to clear obstacles to profitable development projects. But it's not just simple insurance fraud. It's a much larger conspiracy involving real estate development, city planning, and potentially municipal corruption. The next morning, Marcus and I meet at the office early to request emergency access to the evidence locker. We need to review physical evidence from all 9 fire scenes to look for connections we might have missed. Captain Rodriguez, our supervisor, is a 25-year veteran who's seen everything and doesn't rattle easily. But when we explain the connection to last night's arson, he gets serious quickly. You think someone is targeting you personally because of this investigation. I think someone doesn't want this investigation to continue, which means we're close to something that threatens powerful people. What kind of resources do you need? Full access to all evidence from the 9 fires, lab time for accelerant analysis, and I want to request federal assistance. If this is what I think it is, it crosses multiple jurisdictions and involves conspiracy charges that are beyond our usual scope. Captain Rodriguez leans back in his chair, processing the implications. If you're right about this, we're looking at one of the biggest arson conspiracies in state history. Multiple murders, tens of millions of dollars in property damage and insurance fraud, potentially corruption charges against public officials. That's exactly what I think we're looking at. Do what you need to do. You have full department support and whatever resources you require. But Sarah, if these people are willing to burn down a fire investigator's house, they're extremely dangerous. Watch your back. We spend the morning re-examining accelerant samples, burn pattern photographs, witness statements, and insurance records from all 9 fires. What emerges is a much clearer picture of the arson ring's methods, timeline, and financial motivations. Look at this, I tell Marcus, spreading out a map of the city with pins marking each fire location. They're not random targets. Every single building that burned was in a neighborhood undergoing rapid gentrification. Okay, so they're targeting properties in development areas. Classic insurance fraud. Buy rundown property, insure it for more than it's worth, burn it down, collect the payout. It's more sophisticated than that. Look at who benefited from each fire. I pull out a chart I've been working on that tracks property ownership before and after each fire. In every single case, the property was sold within 6 months of the fire to the same development company, Phoenix Rising Development. Marcus whistles low. That's not a coincidence. Phoenix Rising Development is owned by a shell company called Mountain Vista Holdings, which is owned by another shell company called Pacific Investment Group. But I traced the ownership chain through public records and corporate filings. The ultimate owner is a company called Meridian Holdings. Never heard of it. Most people haven't. But Meridian Holdings is the parent company of several major construction firms, including Brennan Construction. The words hang in the air between us like smoke. Marcus stares at me for a long moment, understanding the implications. Your father's company. The realization hits me like a physical blow. My own father's company has been behind the arson ring that destroyed my home and nearly killed me. The family that rejected me last night, that told me to sleep on the street while my house smoldered, has been profiting from a criminal conspiracy that has murdered at least 4 innocent people. Sarah, we need to be very careful how we handle this. If your father is personally involved, then he goes to prison like any other criminal, I say, but my voice is shaking. I don't care if he's my father. I don't care if my mother never speaks to me again. I don't care if Emma disowns me. I care about justice for Dr. Mitchell and the other victims. I care about stopping these murders before they kill more people. But even as I say it, I feel the weight of what this means. Investigating my own family, potentially sending my father to prison, confirming once and for all that I really am the enemy they've always treated me as. We're going to need a lot more evidence before we can even think about arresting Robert Brennan, Marcus says carefully. Corporate ownership chains don't prove personal involvement in arson and murder. He's right, of course. But it explains why someone was watching me closely enough to know my schedule and target my case files. If Brennan Construction is involved in this conspiracy, my father would have access to detailed information about ongoing investigations through his political connections and business relationships. Over the next 3 days, we build our case methodically. We trace financial records, analyze insurance payouts, interview witnesses, and dig deeper into the corporate structure of Phoenix Rising Development. What we discover is a conspiracy that's much larger and more sophisticated than either of us initially imagined. Phoenix Rising Development has purchased and redeveloped 43 properties in the past 2 years. 9 of those properties were acquired after suspicious fires destroyed the previous buildings. But that's just the beginning. 27 other properties were acquired after the previous owners declared bankruptcy following various accidents. Gas leaks that forced expensive remediation, structural problems that required major repairs, zoning violations that led to hefty fines. The pattern is clear. Meridian Holdings and its subsidiaries identify properties in prime development areas, then use various methods to force the current owners into financial distress. Arson is just one tool in their toolkit. They also use fraudulent building inspections, manufactured environmental problems, zoning challenges, and strategic lawsuits to drive property owners into bankruptcy. The insurance companies have paid out nearly $80 million in claims related to properties that were later developed by Phoenix Rising. The development projects have generated an estimated $200 million in revenue for Meridian Holdings and its subsidiaries. And at the center of it all is Brennan Construction, which has been awarded exclusive contracts to handle the demolition and rebuilding on every single site. This is RICO territory, I tell Marcus as we review the financial evidence. Racketeering, conspiracy, multiple murders, insurance fraud, potentially bribery and corruption if they've been paying off building inspectors and zoning officials. The federal prosecutors are going to love this case. But we still need to catch them in the act to make arrests. All of this financial evidence is circumstantial. We need to connect specific individuals to specific crimes. There's going to be another fire, I say with certainty. The pattern shows they hit a new target every 6 to 8 weeks. It's been 7 weeks since the Patterson warehouse. So where's the next target? I've been studying property records, insurance policies, and development plans for the entire city. There are 3 buildings that fit the profile perfectly, but one stands out as the most likely target: the Riverside Community Center. It's a 1950s single-story brick building in the rapidly gentrifying Riverside district that houses after-school programs, senior citizen activities, and community meetings. About 400 people use the facility every week, including children and elderly residents. The building is insured for $2 million, but the land it sits on is worth at least $4 million for redevelopment. Most importantly, I discovered yesterday that the city has been pressuring the community center to sell the property for 6 months. The center's board has refused all offers, but they're struggling financially. A fire that destroys the building would force them to accept an insurance settlement and vacate the property. It's going to be the community center on Elm Street. It fits all the criteria, and I found out yesterday that Phoenix Rising Development has been trying to buy that property for 8 months. The deals keep falling through because the community group won't sell, so they're going to burn it down instead. That's exactly what they're going to do, and we're going to be waiting for them. But first, we need approval for a surveillance operation. Captain Rodriguez listens to our theory and reviews our evidence carefully. This is a huge risk, he says. If you're wrong, we're wasting significant resources on a wild theory. If you're right, but they spot the surveillance, they might change targets or disappear entirely. And if you're right, and they proceed with the arson, we're potentially putting firefighters and civilians at risk. Captain, these people murdered Dr. Mitchell. They murdered 3 other innocent people. They tried to murder me. How many more people have to die before we take action? He considers this for a long moment. What do you need? That evening, we set up surveillance positions around the Riverside Community Center. Marcus and I are positioned in an unmarked van across the street, with a clear view of the building's main entrance. 2 other teams are covering the rear entrance and side exits. Fire trucks are standing by at stations within 3 minutes of the location, and paramedics are stationed nearby. The community center closes at 9 p.m. after an evening ESL class for recent immigrants. By 9:30, the building is empty and dark. By 10 p.m., the neighborhood is quiet except for occasional traffic on Elm Street. We wait. At 10:47 p.m., a white utility van with Bay Area Gas and Electric logos parks 2 blocks away on a side street. Through night vision binoculars, I can see 2 men in utility coveralls getting equipment out of the back of the van. That's them, I whisper into my radio. The van matches Mrs. Henderson's description perfectly, including a dent in the rear bumper. The 2 men move with professional confidence, carrying tool bags and equipment cases that are too heavy to contain normal repair tools. Marcus coordinates with the other surveillance teams while I photograph everything through a telephoto lens. We need to catch them in the act of setting the fire, not just preparing for it. The 2 arsonists approach the community center from the rear, using specialized tools to disable the alarm system and gain entry through a back door. They're inside for exactly 18 minutes, long enough to distribute accelerant throughout the building and set up ignition devices, but not long enough to arouse suspicion if anyone happened to notice the utility workers on site. When they exit the building and return to their van, I can smell the accelerant from 3 blocks away. They've used a massive amount, enough to ensure the entire building burns to the ground within 30 minutes. Move in now, I radio to all teams. We converge on the building from multiple directions as the arsonists drive away. Marcus coordinates the pursuit while I run into the community center with a portable chemical detector to assess the accelerant placement and begin evacuation procedures. The detector goes off immediately. The entire building is saturated with accelerant, not just in 1 or 2 rooms, but throughout the structure. The walls, floors, furniture, and ceiling tiles have all been doused. If this fire had been allowed to start, it would have created an inferno that could have spread to neighboring buildings and killed anyone who happened to be nearby. But they haven't lit it yet. The ignition devices are set for delayed activation, probably to give the arsonists time to establish an alibi. We've caught them before the fire started. The 2 arsonists are apprehended 4 blocks away after a brief chase that ends when their van runs into a police roadblock. In their vehicle, we find 5 gallons of the same custom accelerant blend that was used in all 9 previous fires, professional arson equipment including timer-based ignition devices, fake utility company IDs, and most importantly, a cell phone with text messages coordinating tonight's job. The text messages lead us to a number registered to Phoenix Rising Development, and from there to a web of communications that connects the arsonists to their handlers, and ultimately to the people funding the operation. We have them. The arrests begin at 6 a.m. on Friday morning, with simultaneous raids coordinated by federal agents, local police, and fire investigators. The 2 arsonists are charged with conspiracy to commit arson and attempted murder. 3 executives at Phoenix Rising Development are arrested for racketeering, conspiracy, and murder. 2 city building inspectors are arrested for taking bribes. A zoning board member is arrested for conspiracy. And at 7:30 a.m., federal agents arrive at Brennan Construction headquarters to arrest Robert Brennan. I'm not there for my father's arrest. I don't want to see it, and I don't need to see it. The evidence speaks for itself. Financial records show that Meridian Holdings paid Brennan Construction $47 million over 2 years for specialized demolition and rebuilding services. Chemical analysis proves that the accelerants used in all 9 fires were manufactured exclusively by Brennan Construction for use in controlled demolition projects. Corporate documents seized from my father's office include detailed plans for the community center arson and discussions of eliminating the fire investigator problem. But I do watch the morning news coverage from Marcus's living room, eating Beth's homemade pancakes and drinking coffee that tastes like freedom. Good morning. I'm Jennifer Martinez with Channel 7 News. Our top story this morning. Federal agents have arrested 9 people in connection with a massive arson conspiracy that has killed at least 4 people and caused over $100 million in property damage across the Bay Area. The reporter stands outside Brennan Construction headquarters as my father is led away in handcuffs. He looks older than his 58 years, and for a moment, I feel a pang of sympathy. Then I remember Dr. Mitchell dying alone in her apartment, choking on toxic fumes from chemicals his company manufactured. The conspiracy was uncovered by fire investigator Sarah Flame, who persisted with her investigation even after arsonists destroyed her own home earlier this week. According to federal prosecutors, the criminal organization was led by construction executive Robert Brennan, who used arson and other methods to force property owners to sell valuable real estate at below-market prices. My phone starts ringing immediately. First my mother, then Emma, then family friends, business associates, people I haven't heard from in years. I let them all go to voicemail. The first message is from my mother, and her voice sounds different, smaller, uncertain. Sarah, honey, I saw the news. I don't understand what's happening. Please call me back. We need to talk. The second is from Emma, and she's crying. Sarah, they're saying Dad might go to prison for murder. This can't be real. And they said you were the one who caught him? I don't understand any of this. Please call me. The third is from my father's assistant. Miss Brennan, your father asked me to call you. He says there's been a terrible misunderstanding, and he needs to speak with you immediately. He says you're the only one who can help him. No misunderstanding. No help. Just consequences finally catching up to choices. But the fourth message surprises me. It's from my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister who lives in Portland. We've barely spoken since I was a teenager, but she sounds proud. Sarah, I just saw the news. I always knew you had the courage to do what's right, even when it was hard. I'm proud of you for standing up for justice, no matter what it cost you personally. Over the next week, the magnitude of the conspiracy becomes clear as federal investigators trace the money and uncover the full scope of the operation. It wasn't just 9 arson fires. It was a systematic criminal enterprise that used arson, fraud, intimidation, and corruption to steal property worth over $300 million. Dr. Patricia Mitchell wasn't the only murder victim. The accelerant used in the fires contained a specific chemical compound that created toxic fumes designed to incapacitate victims before they could escape. 4 people died from chemical poisoning, and dozens of others suffered permanent respiratory damage. The chemical compound was manufactured exclusively by Brennan Construction's subsidiary, Apex Chemical Solutions, supposedly for use in controlled demolition projects. But internal documents show that my father personally approved the development of an enhanced formula specifically for the arson operation. This wasn't just insurance fraud or real estate manipulation. This was a deliberate program of murder designed to terrorize property owners into selling their land. Marcus and I spent 3 days giving statements to federal investigators, turning over all our evidence, and explaining how we connected the financial and technical elements of the conspiracy. The FBI agents tell us that our investigation prevented at least 6 additional arson attacks that were already in planning stages. On Wednesday afternoon, I get a call from my mother asking me to meet her for coffee. I almost decline, but curiosity wins out. I want to understand how she's processing the reality that her husband is a murderer and her daughter is the person who exposed him. We meet at a quiet cafe in Marin County, far from the media circus surrounding the arrests. My mother looks like she's aged 10 years in 1 week. Her usually perfect hair and makeup show signs of stress, and her hands shake as she holds her coffee cup. I don't understand how this happened, she says without preamble. Your father is a good man. He's donated millions to charity. He's employed hundreds of people. He would never hurt anyone. Mom, he murdered 4 people. The evidence is overwhelming. But you're his daughter. How could you do this to your own family? This is the conversation I knew was coming, but it still feels like a physical blow. Even now, faced with overwhelming evidence of my father's guilt, she's more upset with me for exposing the crimes than with him for committing them. Those were real people who died, Mom. Dr. Mitchell was a grandmother. She taught elementary school for 35 years. She volunteered at the animal shelter every weekend. She died alone and in agony because Dad's chemicals poisoned her. I don't believe that. There has to be some explanation. The explanation is that Dad chose money over human lives. He chose profit over morality. And when I got close to exposing him, he tried to kill me too. My mother flinches as if I've slapped her. He wouldn't try to kill you. You're his daughter. He ordered the arson that destroyed my house. If I'd been asleep instead of out running, I would have died. The smoke detectors were disabled. The accelerant was designed to create toxic fumes, and the fire was set to prevent escape. This was attempted murder, Mom. We sit in silence for several minutes. I can see her struggling to reconcile the reality of the evidence with her need to believe in the man she's been married to for 30 years. What am I supposed to do now? She finally asks. You could start by acknowledging that what he did was wrong. You could show some concern for the victims and their families. You could support justice being done instead of making this about how it affects you. You've destroyed our family. No, Mom. Dad destroyed our family when he decided to become a criminal. I just exposed the truth. She leaves the cafe without another word, and I know it's the last conversation we'll ever have where she isn't completely hostile to me. The federal trial begins 4 months later. It's a complex case involving 9 defendants, hundreds of pieces of evidence, and testimony from over 60 witnesses. The media coverage is extensive, with daily reports on television and front-page stories in all the local newspapers. I testify for 3 full days, walking the jury through the technical evidence that proves the fires were arson, the financial evidence that traces the criminal conspiracy, and the chemical evidence that proves the murders were intentional. My father sits at the defendant's table throughout my testimony, wearing expensive suits and maintaining the same arrogant expression I remember from childhood. He doesn't look at me while I'm on the witness stand, but I can feel his anger like a physical presence in the courtroom. On the second day of my testimony, his defense attorney tries to discredit me by suggesting I fabricated evidence to frame my father because of our troubled family relationship. Isn't it true, Ms. Flame, that you have a history of conflict with your father? Yes. And isn't it true that he disapproved of your career choice and refused to support you financially? Yes. And isn't it true that you felt rejected and resentful toward your family? Yes. So you had motive to frame him for these crimes, didn't you? I looked directly at my father for the first time during the trial. His eyes are cold, calculating, completely devoid of any parental affection or regret. I had motive to find the truth, I say clearly. But evidence doesn't change based on family relationships. Accelerant residue doesn't disappear because I'm angry at my father. Financial records don't lie because of personal grievances. Victims don't become less dead because of my feelings. But you must acknowledge that your personal animosity toward the defendant influenced your investigation. My personal feelings influenced my determination to get justice for the victims. When Dr. Mitchell died, I promised myself I would find the person responsible, no matter who they were or what it cost me personally. When someone burned down my house to stop that investigation, I became even more determined. And when I discovered that my own father was behind these murders, I didn't hesitate to pursue the evidence wherever it led, even though it meant sending your father to prison, especially because it meant sending my father to prison. Justice means everyone is accountable for their actions, regardless of wealth, status, or family connections. My father used his position and resources to commit terrible crimes. He doesn't get a pass because he's related to me. The prosecutor's closing argument focuses on the mountain of evidence connecting my father to the conspiracy: financial records, chemical analysis, communications intercepts, and witness testimony from his co-conspirators who agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences. The defense closing argument focuses entirely on trying to portray me as a vindictive daughter who manufactured evidence to frame an innocent father. They argue that family dysfunction explains everything, that I'm mentally unstable due to professional stress and personal trauma. The jury deliberates for 8 hours over 2 days. They find my father guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, conspiracy, racketeering, arson, fraud, and organized criminal activity. The judge sentences him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. My mother and Emma are in the courtroom when the verdict is read. They both cry when the judge announces the sentence. My mother looks at me with pure hatred as the bailiff leads my father away in shackles. Emma just looks confused and heartbroken. I feel sad for them, but I don't regret my choices. Dr. Mitchell's granddaughter, Anna, is also in the courtroom, and she nods to me with gratitude and respect. That matters more than my family's approval ever could. After the trial, the media coverage shifts to the broader implications of the case. Federal investigators use the evidence from our investigation to uncover similar conspiracies in 3 other states. 8 more people are indicted for related crimes. The insurance industry begins implementing new safeguards to prevent similar fraud schemes. Marcus and I are commended by the FBI, the state fire marshal, the mayor's office, and the International Association of Fire Chiefs. The insurance companies involved in the case pay a combined reward of $200,000 for our investigation, which we split equally. I use my $100,000 as a down payment on a new house, smaller than my old one, but in a safer neighborhood, with a state-of-the-art security system and fireproof safes for my case files. My relationship with my family is over. My mother and Emma moved to Florida immediately after the trial to avoid the continued media attention. They changed their last names and cut all contact with me. I received 1 Christmas card that year with no personal message, just my mother's signature. But I build a new family with people who understand and respect what I do. Marcus and Beth include me in every holiday gathering and family celebration. Anna, Dr. Mitchell's granddaughter, becomes first a close friend and eventually my romantic partner. She understands better than anyone why I made the choices I did, because she knows the cost of letting criminals escape justice. 6 months after the trial, I'm promoted to senior fire investigator and put in charge of a new federal task force focused on arson-related organized crime. My expertise in financial investigation, chemical analysis, and criminal conspiracy makes me uniquely qualified for the position. The work is difficult, sometimes dangerous, and occasionally heartbreaking. But every case I solve prevents future victims, protects innocent people, and upholds the principle that no one is above the law, not even family. 1 year after my father's conviction, I receive an unexpected phone call from Emma. She's calling from Miami, where she and her husband have started over with new identities and a carefully constructed story about their past. Sarah, I've been thinking about everything that happened, about the trial, about Dad, about how we treated you. I wait for her to continue. I read about Dr. Mitchell and the other victims. I read the trial transcripts and the FBI reports. I understand now what Dad really did. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry we didn't believe you. I'm sorry we kicked you out when your house burned down. I'm sorry we chose him over you, when we should have chosen what was right. Thank you for saying that. Is there any way we could try to rebuild our relationship? I think about it carefully. Emma was young, sheltered, and completely unprepared to deal with the reality that our father was a murderer. Her initial response was wrong, but understandable. Maybe, but it would have to be on different terms than before. I can't have people in my life who think family loyalty is more important than justice. I can't have people in my life who would choose protecting criminals over protecting victims. I understand that now. What Dad did was evil, and you did the right thing by stopping him, even though it cost you everything. It didn't cost me everything. It cost me a family that didn't really value me anyway, but it gave me something more important. The knowledge that I can live with myself, that I choose justice over comfort, and that I'll never compromise my integrity for anyone. I want to learn to be more like that. I want to be someone who stands up for what's right. We talk for 2 hours, mostly about her process of understanding what really happened and how she's trying to rebuild her life around different values. It's not a complete reconciliation. Too much has happened for that. But it's a beginning. My mother never calls. According to Emma, she still believes my father was framed and that I'm the real villain in the story. Some people can never accept uncomfortable truths about the people they love. I've learned to make peace with that. 2 years after the trial, I'm featured on the cover of Fire Investigator magazine for my work developing new techniques for tracking organized arson conspiracies. The article describes how the Brennan case changed law enforcement approaches to investigating complex financial crimes involving arson. 3 years after the trial, I testify before Congress about the need for stronger regulations on accelerant manufacturing and better coordination between local and federal agencies in investigating arson conspiracies. 4 years after the trial, I publish a book about the investigation called Burning Truth: How I Solved the Deadliest Arson Conspiracy in California History. The book becomes a bestseller and leads to speaking engagements across the country. 5 years after the trial, Anna and I get married in a small ceremony in Marcus and Beth's backyard, surrounded by the family we've chosen, colleagues who respect our work, friends who value our integrity, and mentors who taught us that justice is worth fighting for even when it's difficult. Emma comes to the wedding. My mother does not. 6 years after the trial, I'm appointed as the youngest ever state fire marshal for California. In my acceptance speech, I talk about the importance of following evidence wherever it leads, regardless of personal cost or political pressure. Some cases require us to make difficult choices. I tell the assembled crowd of law enforcement officials, politicians, and media representatives. Sometimes doing the right thing means sacrificing relationships, comfort, and security. But our obligation is to the victims who can't speak for themselves, to the communities we protect, and to the principle that justice applies equally to everyone. I don't mention that my father is serving life in prison, or that my family disowned me for exposing his crimes. But everyone in the room knows the story. They know that I chose justice over family loyalty, truth over comfort, and integrity over convenience. And I would make the same choice again. The night after my appointment ceremony, I visit Dr. Mitchell's grave again. Anna and I bring fresh flowers and spend a few minutes in quiet reflection. She would be proud of you, Anna says. I hope so. I've tried to honor her memory by making sure her death led to justice, not just for her, but for future victims who might have died if we hadn't stopped the conspiracy. You did more than that. You proved that one person with courage and expertise can take on powerful criminals and win. You inspired other investigators to be more thorough, more persistent, more willing to ask hard questions. As we drive home, I think about the journey from that night 7 years ago, when I sat outside my burning house, rejected by my family, and facing an uncertain future. I had no idea then that my investigation would lead to my own father, or that choosing justice would cost me every family relationship I thought mattered. But I also had no idea that it would lead to a career I love, relationships based on mutual respect and shared values, and the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing you've used your talents to protect innocent people and uphold the rule of law. Some people might say I lost my family, but I think I found my true family, the community of people who believe in justice, who value expertise and integrity, who understand that some principles are worth sacrificing everything to defend. This story teaches us that expertise, moral courage, and determination can triumph over wealth, power, and family pressure, even when the cost seems unbearable. Sometimes the most important battles are fought not against strangers, but against the people closest to us, who choose comfort over justice and loyalty over truth. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between family expectations and doing what you knew was right? Share your story in the comments below. And if you believe that justice is more important than family loyalty when crimes are involved, give it a like and subscribe for more stories like this. Let me know where you're watching from.